Hi, everybody. I'm Chloe Beaupré. I had a handful of interesting experiences when I was doing research for my master's project, but one of my personal favorite stories was last July. I was doing fieldwork up a popular hiking trail near Crested Butte, and this group of hikers stopped me and they said, "We were told there'd be wildflowers on this trail, and we haven't seen any. Where are the wildflowers? Have you seen them?" Where are the wildflowers? Well, this is quite literally what it looked like that day. So, as you can imagine, I was pretty thrown by their question, and I spent a while thinking about what they thought a wildflower was. But eventually, my mind wandered back to the question that was guiding my fieldwork that day. And the question that our research team has been asking is not where are the wildflowers, but where is the wildlife on this trail? For my master's project, I worked with Colorado Parks and Wildlife and another master's student to address the question of how summer recreation influences mule deer and elk in the Gunnison Basin. For this presentation, I'll go through our trail camera methodology and study design. For my analysis, I focused on mule deer and elk encounter rate, which I'll explain further, and present some preliminary results. Then I'll hand it over to Elisa, and she'll dive deeper into photo classification and analysis. To better understand how deer and elk might be responding to trails, this project used remotely triggered trail cameras. Each on-trail camera was paired with an off-trail camera at distances between 50 and 1,800 meters away from the trail. Habitat characteristics were matched using a habitat model to ensure that the on and off-trail cameras were as similar as possible, with the only difference being the presence of a trail. The paired cameras provided a comparison of animal encounters on and off trail at a gradient of distances, while the on-trail cameras yielded a count of recreation traffic to assess how animals respond to varying amounts of trail use. Our study was conducted throughout the trail system of the Upper Gunnison Basin on Colorado's western slope. Trails were defined as any designated routes, but not including major highways or maintained paved roads. The study area boundary was based on the typical extent of GPS-collared deer and elk summer range, game management units, topography, and roads. While there's no guarantee of privacy when outdoors on public lands, some federal land managers had concerns about local perception of using trail cameras to measure recreation, and ultimately we were unable to deploy on-trail cameras on public land. So we ended up placing cameras on public trails in locations where we could get permission. And it's a little hard to see this far zoomed out, but each on-trail camera is deployed on state wildlife areas, land trusts, or private property where we collaborated with the landowners. Here's what that looks like zoomed in at one of our paired sites. On-trail cameras deployed here on a public hiking trail that crosses through a private property parcel. The off-trail cameras deployed about 1,300 meters east. You can see that these two locations are at around 9,000 feet in elevation in these similar north-south drainages and in canopy cover. We deployed 120 cameras throughout July, did a mid-season check in September, and retrieved everything in November. Leaving cameras out through November enabled a comparison of animal responses before and during hunting season, and it also made for some snowy camera retrieval adventures. We had a few cameras stolen and a few non-human vandals as well. We did post contact information on all cameras and didn't receive any questions or concerns from trailgoers throughout the duration of the study. And so we do stand by the trail camera methodology for measuring recreation traffic. In the design phase, a lot of folks encouraged us to use alternative platforms that just weren't appropriate for our study. We're fortunate here in Gunnison that we do have trails where we see animal traffic, even during the day. And so with more simple traffic counters, this group of elk would have been miscounted as human traffic, which would skew our recreation measures and our results. And Elisa's going to focus more on the joys of classifying 500,000 trail camera photos. So stay tuned for that. And I'm going to dive deeper into my analysis component of the project. The response variable I'm focused on is animal encounter rate, which measures mule deer and elk usage at a site. And I'll quickly walk you through how we developed this metric for time and animal spent at a camera. So this cone is the camera's field of view, which might vary based on where a camera was deployed or camera brand. Whenever an animal is within the camera's field of view, it triggers one photo per second. So each photo captured represents a 1-second animal observation event. We take the number of animals in a photo divided by the field of view area in square meters, and then we sum these observations by time units of interest, and this could be by day or the entire study period duration. Lastly, we divide by that same time unit of interest, which is dividing by 1 at the daily level, or by number of days a camera was deployed if you're looking at the entire study period. This provides a standardized metric of deer elk encounter rate in units of seconds per meter squared that accounts for how long a camera was deployed and any field of view size differences between sites. These two scatter plots show the average encounter rates by day at all of our sites. Elk encounters are on the left and deer are on the right. Purple are the off-trail cameras and golden brown are the on-trail cameras. This line graph shows the mean recreation traffic across all of our sites. You can see these really distinct spikes on the weekends, and then there's this huge drop off right after day 251, which was Labor Day. And if you were in Gunnison, you know we got this freak snowstorm right after Labor Day, which really marked the end of summer, and it seemed to have kept people off of the trails for a few days. So once we collected all of this traffic and animal encounter data, we created models to get at the question of how distance to trail and traffic volume might influence deer and elk encounter rates. Statistical models mathematically approximate relationships, and in this case, we modeled animal encounter rate as a function of the recreational covariates we measured. And this includes distance to trail, volume of recreation traffic, and whether a route was motorized or non-motorized. We're still very much in the data analysis phase, so everything I'm sharing is preliminary and still being teased apart. Here's a summary of our top performing model thus far, and this shows elk encounters as a function of recreational covariates at the daily resolution. Environmental variables like canopy cover, elevation, and housing density haven't yet been incorporated into this model. And don't get scared by all the numbers because I'm about to show a graphical representation of the modeled effects. Again, these are preliminary results, but these graphs show the predicted elk encounters on the y-axis as a function of distance to trail, which is shown on the x-axis. The panel on the left is non-motorized routes, and the right panel is motorized routes. Different colored lines represent varying recreation traffic volumes. As you can see, our cameras showed a higher likelihood of encountering elk the farther away you get from a trail, with more elk encounters away from the non-motorized routes. The distance to trail response seems to align with what other published studies have shown. However, the increase in elk encounters with higher recreation volumes is a bit counterintuitive, and next steps for data analysis include refining this model and perhaps running a more complicated analysis that accounts for timing-related effects. Like I've said, we're still in the data analysis phase, but my preliminary results have shown me that the influence of recreation on deer and elk is incredibly complex, but there is an influence of some kind when you're out there recreating, no matter what kind of user you are, whether you're out there trail running, hiking, or ripping around on a dirt bike or an ATV. And so to return to this question that haunts me, where are the wildflowers? And I'm only kind of kidding because there are folks out there who don't have an appreciation for the wildflowers right under their noses, which means they probably aren't aware of the wildlife that's hanging out of sight of most trails. I want outdoor recreation to be inclusive and welcoming for everybody, but we all need to remember that where we recreate is wildlife habitat. It's animals' homes, and they have nowhere else to go. So with the continual growth of outdoor recreation in Colorado, we run the risk of loving these wild places to death at the expense of wildlife. If wildlife is something that we value as a society, we need to be thoughtful about the impacts that recreation causes, regardless of what kind of user you are. We need to be creative and willing to make different and smarter decisions about recreation that are considerate of wildlife. I'm so humbled by the opportunity to participate in this research, and I have so much and so many people to be grateful for. A few in particular are listed here. Thank you all for joining my presentation, and I'll see you back on the panel for questions.